I started this new series where we're going to be discussing different topics like today we're talking about gaslighting. So it's things to identify different forms of abuse or manipulation, and also maybe some skills that you could be learning in the process. So thank you for everybody who's here tuning in live or who is watching the recording. Please be respectful in the comments. I'd appreciate it. And if you are experiencing any form of abuse, of course, you don't have to share. But if you'd like, we strive to be supportive for all people who are going through forms of abuse or are survivors of abuse. Okay, so what I wanted to start off with is, let's see. I'm going to share my screen. And so I'm not a psychologist or a therapist or a counselor or a healthcare provider. However, as a certified coach and a certified happiness trainer, in the process, I've learned tools. And of course, I've studied and researched some of these different elements, not only for myself personally, but also to help other clients. So I didn't help them. I wasn't in a therapy or counseling capacity, but I've helped people to really to just feel more empowered in their lives. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about was gaslighting. So a couple weeks ago, we talked about emotional manipulation and how to identify it and things to do. And so gaslighting was a big one that came up. And I think that people don't really understand what the term is. And so, and just for future reference, I will be featuring and interviewing therapists, healthcare providers to get into some of the more sensitive topics. So these that I can I feel comfortable talking about, or I can get like what I'm doing here is referencing an article from Psychology Today. I'm happy to discuss this, but when we get into more sensitive topics, then I really want to have a professional that is able to speak on these. And okay, so this is called The Anatomy of Gaslighting and the Strategies that best help victims recover. So what is gaslighting? Gaslighting is a form of manipulation in which one person induces another to doubt their own sense of reality, starting with being pressed to see an unhealthy relationship as coming from love and good intention. There is surprisingly scant research on gaslighting, considering the attention it has received. And this article is from May 2023. So that's surprising that there isn't that much research on gaslighting. And it says that once the survivor has accepted their epistemic incompetence, insecurity regarding one's grasp on reality, the perpetrator is able to use this to their advantage, mainly by avoiding accountability for their own behavior and controlling their survivor's behavior. So what we're talking about here is the behavior of the perpetrator, of the abuser, right? So regardless of whether it's emotional, verbal abuse, whatever that is, on the perpetrator side, these are the behaviors that we're talking about. People that are not taking accountability for their actions, overstepping boundaries, making you feel crazy or like you're out of touch or out of reality, and even sometimes blaming you for the behavior. So this is the types of things that we want to identify today. So there was a study done on 65 gaslighting survivors, predominantly women asking them 15 open-ended questions about their experience. And the common themes had to do with relationship dynamics, behaviors, motivations, and consequences for survivors. So let's talk about relationship dynamics. There is a concept that is called love bombing. And I know I've experienced that in a particularly toxic relationship that I was in, that fortunately I got out of. And it said here, most respondents reported that the relationship kicked off with love bombing. While there is a normal honeymoon phase in all new relationships, in retrospect, the romantic engagement in relationships that end up in gaslighting is intensively exaggerated and ultimately hollow. Love bombing is characterized by early intimacy, premature sharing, and the formation of a premature, strong bond. It often involves sharing of traumatic experiences, short-circuiting caution, and creating instant intimacy. Love bombing makes it hard to separate later due to feelings of indebtedness and confusion about the perpetrator's goodwill. One thing it doesn't say is the part of the love bomb is that they're showering you with attention, compliments, maybe gifts. That's the love bomb part. And so in my case, I felt like I was on a pedestal with this person for like 3 months. And then when things shifted 180, I was like, wait a second, this person is super attentive. And I had characterized that person as a certain way. And when the 180 behavior started, it was confusing. That's where I felt gaslit. So a lot of times it starts with the love bombing. The next thing here, it says survivor isolation. Gaslighters badmouth their partner's friends and family, and in my experience, often therapists. Jealousy leads to canceled plans and stoked fears of abandonment, leading survivors to do anything to make the gaslighter happy. Isolation enables further gaslighting by cutting off alternative perspectives, and it solidifies the abusive bond, making it hard for others to intervene. So again, if you feel like you're being taken away or you have been removed from your friends and family, or maybe they're bad mouthing that person. I mean, even as I'm reading this, I'm like, oh yeah, that happened. Oh yeah, that happened. Right. So this is really good, even for me as I'm reading this, we want this to be a not only for awareness purposes, but also a healing process, right? So that you realize that you weren't crazy, that these are behaviors that a gaslighter, a manipulator, possibly a narcissist, or somebody with narcissistic tendencies has and does to establish control in relationships. All right, now there's the perpetrator unpredictability. Gaslighters were unpredictable, swinging from being loving and affectionate to distant, angry, or argumentative within the span of hours, days, or weeks. Cold shouldering, suddenly cutting off communication, was an important move, not directly a part of gaslighting, but a power play to keep the survivor off balance and desperate to get back in good graces. So, quite frankly, if somebody is cold shouldering you for something that doesn't warrant that, like, what would warrant that? If you cheated on somebody, yeah, expect that the other person is going to be hurt, right? But if somebody's cold shouldering you because they think you cheated on them, that is a different story. That could be gaslighting. That could be narcissistic manipulation and abuse. Specific gaslighting behaviors. Insults and accusations. Comments by gaslighters were largely intended to cast doubt on the survivor's credibility, with familiar charges of being crazy, quote, crazy or overly emotional, discounting the other's grasp that abuse was taking place, especially under the sway of traumatic bond established by love bombing, often left survivors conflicted, shamed, and guilt-ridden for questioning their partner's intent. Right. This is a form of verbal abuse, right? So definitely, if somebody is being insulting or accusing you, that could be a form of gaslighting and could be a form of manipulation. Blaming. Gaslighters often blamed survivors for things that were not their fault, things that were clearly not under their influence. Even things like infidelity were blamed on the survivor. Okay, interesting. Blame painted the survivor a perpetrator, but by ascribing things to them they didn't do and painting the actual perpetrator as a helpless victim, following the so-called DARVO playbook: defend and reverse, victim and oppressor. So I had a particular instance where an ex actually had reached out to me, and I hid it from my partner because I didn't know all of this back then, but I knew that he would flip out if he found out. And so when he did find out, partially because he took my phone and saw the text, another big red flag. And then my partner became the victim there. So then I was the bad guy, he became the victim. So typical defend and reverse, victim, oppressor. So if you ever hear of DARVO, and I think that's something I want to talk about more because I keep hearing this come up. So when I keep hearing things come up, I know it's something I need to talk about. DARVO. So we'll talk to that. I'd love to talk to an actual therapist on this. I feel like that would be really helpful to learn more about this. Motivations for gaslighting. Avoiding accountability. The most common gaslighting motive was to avoid accountability, most commonly to excuse infidelity, often accompanied by accusing the survivor of being crazy, imagining things, or paranoid. Control. A desire for control was the next most common reported motivation for gaslighting. One participant mentioned being harassed constantly while preparing for medical school. The the perpetrator trying to convince her she wasn't good enough or smart enough to be a doctor. Controlling behavior ramps up when the survivor shows independence or autonomy. My partner, this particular person I'm talking about, hadn't gone to university, and I had a master's, and he was making me feel like that meant nothing. Like basically making himself feel better by putting me down, making it sound like my education meant nothing. And I knew that that was not true. And I also knew that that was bad, like bad. But yet I'm still in this relationship because he love bombed me. So I'm thinking he's one way. And then when he starts acting completely opposite of that, I was confused. I was stuck in this gaslighting bubble that we're talking about. So the consequences for the survivor: diminished sense of self. Gaslighting survivors report negative impact on sense of self with feelings of being no good. For example, I felt very confused, worthless, unlovable, and broken. Others noted feeling lost, a shell of who they were. Guardedness and mistrust of future relationships. Many survivors were left feeling unsure whether they could trust others and get close again. And they aligned with a diminished sense of self, having doubts not only about their lovability, but also about their capacity to sustain a healthy relationship or notice red flags in future relationships, afraid of re-traumatization. So I know that's definitely happened to me. So if you start to feel like a lower self-esteem as a result of being with somebody, or you don't want to get into a new relationship because you feel like you might be hurt again, that's probably, a repercussion of being with an abuser or being in a abusive relationship, even if it's not physical or sexual. But if there was verbal or emotional or psychological manipulation and abuse, then, and financial, I keep forgetting about that. One thing that I've heard many people talk about is the financial manipulation, where people, maybe if one partner makes more money than the other, the person who makes more money uses that as a way to control the other person. And so then they end up feeling, when they're out of the relationship, they end up feeling not, unworthy. So then there's recovery and post-traumatic growth. Time with others. Survivors reported that spending time with friends and family could be restorative. This was the most common thing people did to recover. Spending time with people who supported their sense of self and helped reestablish trust in their sense of reality was pivotal. And I also say here, because sometimes during a relationship where somebody is isolating you from your friends and family, sometimes we might feel guilty or, like that we don't, that we feel bad about that happening. And I would just say that your friends and family, who love you for the right reasons, will always welcome you back, will always, I remember I said the ones who have your best interest at heart, that really love you unconditionally, won't be offended by that. They'll welcome you back. They'll love you unconditionally, no matter what is happening or what happened. So definitely go back to those people that help you feel whole again. Re-embodying activities. Developing a good body relationship was key, with activities like yoga, meditation, and physical exercise. Study authors point out that such body-oriented activities have been shown to bolster self-concept clarity. Creative, reflective activities, including journaling, writing, and making art, were also part of re-embodiment. That's really cool. I think that might be a fun activity I can do. Maybe we can have like journal hour or something like that, or art hour or something like that, to get us back into the creative flow, which is, is fun, is passionate, is exciting, is happy. So I love that. It's peaceful. I love that. Post-traumatic growth. A number of respondents expressed experiencing post-traumatic growth, responding to adversity by creating a deeper sense of meaning and learning about life and oneself from the experience. Respondents reported a decreased need for others to feel whole, noting enjoying time with oneself more and finding inner peace. Yeah, I love it. Developing a stronger sense of self and learning boundaries improves possibilities for future satisfaction. So once I'm done with this, I'm going to drop in the link at one of my past videos where we actually did 3 tools to help you get grounded and centered and overcome anxiety and stress very quickly. There were 3 different exercises and techniques that I did that were done super quickly, like within a minute or two, or under a minute. One of them was under a minute. So ways that you can really just, feel centered again, feel peace and calm in a very short period of time. So I'm going to post a link to that. And then there's untangling gaslighting. This work is critical, calling for increased attention societally, in individual relationships and in clinical settings. Identifying the common tactics used in gaslighting helps people take evasive action before the perpetrator forms that early pathological bond that is so hard to break later on. I also say that it's not just in romantic relationships. This could be within friends. It could be within family. It could be in a business setting, right? Like there could be either a boss or a coworker who might be gaslighting you. So learning these, being able to identify these different symptoms or whatever of gaslighting, or just what is gaslighting, can help you to identify it, be aware of it, and then overcome it. Trauma-informed approaches are useful to address specific residual ways of feeling, thinking, and behaving etched by gaslighting dynamics. Researchers can develop assessment tools to help identify when gaslighting is taking place based on empirical findings. So, what does it say here? Not all relationship dysfunction is gaslighting. However, and relationship problems are often a two-way street. For example, where there is shared developmental trauma creating conflict between seeking intimacy and unconsciously avoiding it, which co-authors and I call irrelationship. Study author points personal communication. It's important to note that gaslighting exists on a spectrum. Some cases may be easily identifiable as gaslighting and others easily identifiable as not gaslighting, but there will also be trickier cases. Spotting gaslighting is made even more difficult as it depends on an element of plausible deniability. If gaslighting is too obvious, it's unlikely to work. Got it. You see? So usually the gaslighting doesn't happen. If the gaslighting happens too early on in a relationship, then people are going to probably call them a con, a scam, right? Like the whole car salesman, like too salesy. They see it, if it's too early in a relationship, then it's going to be it's going to be easy, too obvious. And like it says here, unlikely to work. So there needs to be, that's why the love bombing happens oftentimes. It's a way to get that person to trust you because you're showing so much attention and love to the person that you create that bond early on, and then they flip into the gaslighting. Making things even more complex, it's possible that some gaslighters don't even realize what they're doing is gaslighting. I think that in cases of confusion or regular disagreements in relationships, both people will be open to changing their views in light of well-reasoned or irrefutable evidence. One thing I will say, as I know that I grew up in a household with narcissistic tendencies, and so even though I know I can identify who was that person, the narcissistic, the person with the most narcissistic tendencies. You learn life in relation to that person. And so until somebody tells you or calls you out on that behavior, sometimes you don't know what you're doing is wrong, or you don't know what you're doing might be manipulative. So there are ways that we have learned to react in accordance with that person. And so usually it takes maturity and people calling you out for you to realize that what you're doing is wrong. So, and I know I mentioned this in the last time when we had the talk on emotional manipulation, where I said that there was a time I remember specifically where I was being a little bit manipulative in a relationship. There was something that I said that I knew was to get something from the other person, but I was able to identify it right there in the moment. And I'm sure I did it before without identifying it. But the fact is that once you identify it, you can be aware and it will help you to stop doing it. And also identify it in other people as well. So that's really important. That's why we're talking about this, because maybe and I've said this last time, we all have narcissistic tendencies because we're human. So there are some things, we are not perfect individuals. So maybe you're on the spectrum of like very little tiny bit, but there's something you've done in your life that has been a little bit self-serving or manipulative or something, even if it's tiny, right? So that's why I said we all have these tendencies. So it's important for us to look at it, to identify it, and also be able to place boundaries, right? That's the last talk we talked about, which was about placing boundaries. So I'll also post a link for that video as well, and I hope that it will serve you. And I'm done with this article. But I'm going to be doing some other talks as well outside of this. Hopefully, and let me put this link. This was the article that we talked about today. Hopefully, we learn something. We can grow from this, and most importantly, like I just said a minute ago, awareness, identify it, and then do something about it. Whether it's placing boundaries, whether it's getting out of the relationship, whether it's getting therapy if you need to, right? I am a huge proponent of counseling and therapy. That's what actually helped me get out of the toxic relationship. That's what helped identify that I needed to place boundaries because I didn't have boundaries. So, whatever it is for you, maybe it's some other, maybe it's going to yoga or meditation, breathing, breath exercises, whatever it is for you. I think the key here is that awareness and then taking action so that we can feel more empowered and get our power back. So I think I feel complete with this. Thank you so much for being here, whether you attended live or in the replay. If you haven't yet, I'd appreciate if you like this video. I'll help get it on in the algorithm. And also, if you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel. And also, I'm creating this new Survivor series where we're talking about different topics and also helping to develop skills that are going to help us feel more empowered and get our power back. So if you have any suggestions for future topics, I'd love for you to post that in the comments as well. And with that, have a blessed weekend. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Remember to trust or at least listen to your intuition. You've got answers. And actually, funny enough, or sad enough, when you are in an abusive relationship and you are being gaslit, a lot of times you don't trust your intuition. You don't even listen to your intuition. So maybe your intuition is not right on something, but I always say, at least listen to it. Listen to your gut. And then you can decide what to do based on that. All right. Well, have a blessed rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye. Remember, you deserve a relationship that builds you up, not tears you down. If you found this video helpful, you may also enjoy this one. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe for more tips on dating intentionally toward holy matrimony. And God bless.